Dr. Jason Fung has a brand new case study looking at type 2 diabetes and the effects of keto and intermittent fasting. Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content, but you got to go follow me. I'm over on Instagram. I am at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live and enjoy the show. We do go live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on Instagram Live. We also simulcast live over here on my Facebook page. So thank you guys for being here. People like Cindy and Paula and Jenny and Karen all just popped in to say hello and watch the show today. Thank you guys for being here. Usually I have a YouTube live stream as well, but my iPhone 10 got wet today and it's at the repair shop. So no YouTube live stream. So if you're watching this on YouTube on replay, I'm sorry I wasn't there live today, but I do promise I am working to get my phone back so that tomorrow's episode of Jimmy Rants, we will be back live on the stream. So thank you for that. So thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, we do put it up on replay on IGTV. As soon as it's over, pop on over there. You can see it in full. We also put the replay up on YouTube. Just type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show, or youtube.com/Livin' Low Carb Man. We also have an official website. It's at jimmyrants.com. And so you can, you can access it there and see all the past episodes there. While you're there, go sign up for the Patreon. Let me tell you why you want to be a Patreon. Number one, you obviously watch me. You like what I do here. So if you like what I do and you get value out of it, throw a little bit of value back at me. But I'm telling you, I am working on the Patreon, you guys, to make it so worth your while to be one of my supporters. For as little as $5 a month is all you have to do. And if you do that, you get early access to the videos of my podcast for the upcoming week. So next week's shows on Wednesday and Thursday will air for you over the weekend. We're going to put those up on the Patreon page, so you get early access to those. We also are going to be doing specific Jimmy Rants episodes just for the Patreons. So if you have a topic you want me to talk about, go to my Patreon page, make the suggestion. I just put up a post on Patreon today that if you have suggestions about things you want me to rant about that I could do for this exclusive rant, we will put those up there. You also will have editorial input on what I do on the live show here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So trying to make it a little more interactive for the people that support me. So please, if you love what I do, I would really appreciate it if you could go show your support. So again, that's at jimmyrants.com. Click on the Patreon link, and any donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Okay, you guys, I have a really exciting Jimmy Rants episode for you today because you've heard me talk for many years all about the benefits of keto. I wrote a book about it, a bunch of books about it, actually, about the ketogenic diet, Keto Clarity being the most popular. I've also written a book about fasting, the complete guide to fasting, by this unknown guy nobody's ever heard of before named Dr. Jason Fung. I'm, of course, being facetious because he is the world's foremost authority when it comes to things about fasting. Well, guess what? Jason and his team, including Megan Ramos, Charlene Lichtash, and Catherine Connor Oistwich, they have published a brand new research paper that is a case study. And this was published in the BMJ Case Reports. Okay, so this has been published. Let's see, when was it published? It was accepted on June 12th, 2020. So a relatively brand new 14-month case study looking at the therapeutic use of intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets as an alternative treatment for type 2 diabetes in a normal weight woman. This is the key. Most of these studies, you guys, that look at type 2 diabetes, it's generally looking at the weight loss effects that whatever the therapy does for the patient. But what if the patient has type 2 diabetes but does not have obesity? What if the patient does not need to lose weight? What if they can actually prove and show that a ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, and really any modality that would improve your state of ketones that would control blood sugar and insulin levels, has nothing at all to do with your weight loss. Because a lot of people over the years say, well, the only reason that the ketogenic diet and fasting ever work for type 2 diabetes is because of the weight loss effects. And so they put the benefits that come to the diabetes from the weight coming off the body. And I assume when you're releasing weight from the body, it means your metabolism is in a good place so that your body can be in a healed state. So there is a little bit of veracity to the statement. But to just put the totality of the benefit that comes from a ketogenic diet and fasting simply on the weight loss is a little bit closed-minded. You're forgetting about the hormonal shifts that take place when you do these things. You forget about all the healing that takes place. The fact that a ketogenic diet and fasting are very anti-inflammatory, and when you lower inflammation in the body, all of these things tend to normalize in your blood sugar and your insulin and all the rest. And so if you're just joining us, I'm about to go over the details of a brand new 14-month case study. This was published by Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, and their whole group, all about the effects of keto and fasting on type 2 diabetes. This was published June the 12th, 2020 in the BMJ case report. So we're going to get into it now. This case demonstrates the effective and sustainable use of IF, intermittent fasting, and KD, the ketogenic diet, in a normal weight patient with type 2 diabetes. Did not attain the glycemic control with a standard care. So standard care, you guys all know it. It's low fat, it's high healthy whole grains, it's here's your medication to cover up the effects of those grains, it's here's some injectable insulin if you can't get your blood sugar and insulin levels under control simply with diet, because that standard diet is raising your blood sugar. So this was a 57-year-old woman with type 2 diabetes taking metformin, which is probably a pretty decent drug for most people with diabetes or insulin resistance to be on if they can't fix things with a ketogenic diet and fasting. Also, strict adherence to the standard diabetic diet. Hemoglobin A1C, get this guys, she's type 2 diabetic. 9.3 is her A1C, so it's pretty out of control type 2 diabetes. Within 4 months of transitioning over to the ketogenic diet along with intermittent fasting, she achieved glycemic control, came off of the metformin. A1C had fallen just in 4 months from 9.3 to 6.4. 3 points just about. IF regimen started at 24 hours 3 times a week. So she did a OMAD basically 3 times a week, followed by 42 hours 3 times per week. So that the next week she did 42-hour fast. So a 42-hour fast is basically just over, it's almost a 2-day fast, but it's just, it lets you finish your meal at say 6 o'clock on a Monday night, and then you get to eat again, not the next day, but the next day, but later in the day. It's kind of cool, the 42-hour fast. We talk about it in the Complete Guide to Fasting, that's one of the strategies that can do it. And it's a little more effective than a 24-hour fast. It pushes the envelope, but obviously you don't jump into 42 hours until you become very well keto adapted. 42 hours 2 times a week and 16 hours once a week. And then a maintenance phase began at 8 months in. Intermittent fasting was reduced to 16, so that's 16-8. So you fast for 16 hours and you have an eating window of 8 hours. So let's say 12 noon till 8 p.m. would be your eating window. So you would fast from 8 p.m. until 12 noon the next day. You would also do 24 hours 3 times a month. So you do OMAD 3 times a month. And then metformin, they restarted it to try to get her A1C to come back down. And that was all at 8 months. Then at the 14-month level, they checked the A1C again and she was down to 5.8. Body mass index, BMI, didn't change. So she made all these profound metabolic changes in her body. And most people would describe that as, oh, that's a weight loss diet, eating keto and then doing all this aggressive intermittent fasting. but she didn't lose any weight because she was normal weight. And people freak out about that. They're like, well, how? I thought it helped you lose weight. It helps you lose weight if you have weight to lose. But if you're already normal weight, like people worry about this with keto. Oh my gosh, when do I know when to stop? Will I just keep wasting away and all the weight will just keep going down way below what I'm supposed to be? Yeah, your body's not that stupid. And think of it this way. You're starting to feed your body in the way it was meant to be fed. As Dr. Berry calls it, the natural human diet. When you eat the natural human diet and you reach your ideal body weight, your normal body weight, guess what? You stop losing weight. You just get the metabolic healing at that point. And that's what they saw with this 58-year-old or 57-year-old type 2 diabetic in this case study. She just healed. And she didn't need to lose weight to bring that healing in. Now, here's the other thing in this. A lot of times people think if you get type 2 diabetes, it makes you fat and obese. And in this case, no. You can have insulin resistance. You can have metabolic disturbance, metabolic derangement, metabolic syndrome, whatever you want to call it. You can have all of those things and be a normal weight. This is why it's kind of ludicrous that we put such a blame and shame on those people who have extra weight on the body, assuming that they're just automatically unhealthy, whereas people who don't have weight on the body and are a normal weight, they're automatically healthy. Like, who came up with that equation, right? The problem is we're very visual people, and what people see on the outside is what they believe is true on the inside, and it's not always the case. All right, let's take a look at the background of this. Diabetes is a disease characterized by hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, varying levels of insulin resistance, and impaired pancreatic beta cell function. Both genetic and environmental factors can contribute to the pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes. The growing epidemic of type 2 diabetes worldwide highlights the need for accessible, preventative, and therapeutic strategies. According to a global estimate by the World Health Organization in 2014, an estimated 422 million adults are currently living with diabetes, with the prevalence of diabetes being doubled since 1980. What else happened in 1980? Oh, that's when the Dietary Guidelines for Americans came out. So that's the legacy of the Dietary Guidelines. They have doubled diabetes rates. Congratulations, USDA. Great job. Way to tell us to eat healthy whole grains and cut down our fat. Way to go. You did well. Chronic disease is at an all-time high. I hope you're proud of yourself. Yes, I'm snarky today. In 2012, diabetes was the 8th leading cause of death among both sexes, the 5th leading cause of death in women. Standard approaches to the treatment of type 2 diabetes incorporate lifestyle management, pharmacotherapy, and occasionally bariatric surgery. Again, going back to that notion that losing weight is what helps with the diabetes, and we know better. The goal of treatment is euglycemia and a reduction of the incidence of microvascular and macrovascular complications from type 2 diabetes. Medical nutrition therapy, they're calling it MNT, is widely accepted as a part of the standard of care in a diabetic patient. So MNT is anything you do to manipulate the nutrition, vis-a-vis fasting, vis-a-vis a ketogenic diet. So these are all things that are being used and accepted as part of the standard of care. So if there's any concern that fasting and keto cannot be used as part of standard of care for a type 2 diabetic patient, they're saying in this paper it's totally within the scope of standard of care. Guidelines cite several different diets, including the Mediterranean diet, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, that's called the DASH diet. It's very famous because it's not just low fat, it's also low salt. The vegetarian diet is another option under that standard of care. And then the low carbohydrate diet is a part of the standard of care. I did not know that when you're treating patients as a physician, standard of care is this is the things you can do to help your patients. And one of those things in the standard of care is a low carb diet. And the low carb diet is as effective in lowering hemoglobin A1C as a drug therapy. However, there is no consensus on what the ideal macronutrient composition of diet is to achieve control or remission of type 2 diabetes. We've seen some other studies. I've done some Jimmy Rants lately. Did one very recently that looked at type 2 diabetes specifically and what diet would be best. And they found a low carb, high fat, ketogenic diet was the best. And of course, it stands to reason. What's raising the blood sugar? What's raising the insulin levels? It's carbohydrates that you're eating. And so the Mediterranean diet, lower-ish in carbs, but it's still higher in carbs. The DASH diet's very low in fat, very high in carbs. The vegetarian diet, it's basically all carbs. And then the low carb diet. So of those four, low carb seems to be the one that would be the best. Ketogenic diets, which include a state of nutritional ketosis, which is a blood level of 0.5 to 3.0 millimoles per liter with beta-hydroxybutyrate, have demonstrated effective reductions in A1C and metabolic parameters in patients with type 2 diabetes. Studies are limited in size and number, and that's true. So we're trying to get those things, the research into that out there a little more, but it's just a slow road for all the reasons why I've talked about in previous episodes of funding and just wanting to be able to look into this. Remission in type 2 diabetes has been demonstrated in large trials studying calorie restriction as well as bariatric surgery. While effective bariatric surgery is limited by its accessibility, potential for complications, and invasive nature, calorie restriction is limited by patient adherence. Yeah, who wants to starve themselves? The whole calorie restriction thing, it's like, okay, you lower your calories from 1,500 to 1,200. What happens when you don't get the results you want at 1,200? You go from 1,200 to 1,000. What happens when you're at 1,000 calories and you're not getting the numbers that you're looking for at 1,000 calories? You go from 1,000 to 750. What happens? You see where I'm going here? There is no end to it until at the point you're just frustrated to no end because you're starving, and then you go binge and your A1C goes way out of control. This is why low carb ketogenic has been so successful for so many people. It's the adherence, the patient wanting to stay on it that has made it so wonderful. And oh yeah, by the way, it works. And so that's a big part of it as well. Calorie restriction results in compensatory changes in the hormone regulators of body weight, effectively reducing your energy expenditure and increasing your hunger. These changes have been shown to persist for at least 12 months after you implement a calorie restricted diet. So get this, you go on a calorie restricted diet, you go down to those numbers like we were just talking about, and you end that, you start eating again, guess what? The hunger, the cravings, the everything lasts for 12 more months after you stop calorie restricting. Now that's powerful. 12 months after you stop doing it? Why would you go on a calorie restricted diet? And this explains the challenge in applying this approach to those with type 2 diabetes. So a diabetic that's trying their darndest to be calorie restricted, they tough it out for 6 to 12 months. Finally, they say enough is enough, and they start eating again. Even if they switched over to maybe a healthier, real food kind of diet, maybe a paleo diet, they're still going to struggle because that low calorie restricted diet has messed them up for upwards of 12 more months. By contrast, listen to this. Intermittent fasting is emerging as a potentially sustainable strategy to achieve control or full remission of type 2 diabetes. Fasting is the voluntary abstinence from food, and intermittent fasting is an eating regimen by which all the meals are consumed within a very strictly defined window of time, then followed by fasting. Some available studies on IF use variations of fasting that allow for the ingestion of much fewer calories during this window, while others abstain from caloric intake altogether. Patterns and lengths of fasting are varied among all the studies. Studies on the therapeutic use of intermittent fasting in type 2 diabetes are very limited. Herein, today in this case study, we present a woman with type 2 diabetes who successfully used the combination of intermittent fasting and a low-carb ketogenic diet to get her glycemic control under control. So while reduction of body weight is typically the goal of someone going on intermittent fasting, not all patients who suffer from type 2 diabetes are overweight. Many cases of type 2 diabetes improve or go into remission with weight loss, but the two goals are not the same. This is such a key point. If you're intermittent fasting, if you are keto, and you don't have weight on your body, but you have out of control blood sugar, out of control insulin levels, type 2 diabetes, or some other metabolic disturbance, don't think you can't go keto and you can't implement fasting just because you don't have weight loss. Why people think ketogenic diets are a weight loss diet is beyond me. Weight loss is not the goal of nutritional ketosis. Weight loss is the mechanism by which you heal your body from the chronic diseases that are plaguing you. And if you happen to have extra weight on the body that needs to be shed, then it is an effective way of tapping into stored body fat as a fuel source, and that's how you lose weight if you need to. So there's this mistaken notion that the primary purpose of going on a low-carb ketogenic diet with some periods of intermittent fasting is to lose weight, and it is not. I wouldn't even put it near the top of the list. The very top of the list would be glycemic control, insulin control, inflammation lowering. Those are the reasons you go keto and intermittent fast. In this case, a change in dietary pattern did effectively control her type 2 diabetes, although the patient was not overweight and her overall weight change was very minimal. So let's get into the presentation about this case study. 57-year-old woman, 15-year history of type 2 diabetes, had been managed for the majority of her illness using metformin and the standard low-fat diabetes diet. She had a remote history of gestational diabetes at age 20 and 34 years old when she had her kids. At the time of her diagnosis with type 2 diabetes at age 42, her A1C was at 7.1, BMI was 21.9, classified as normal weight. During the course of her illness, she had strictly adhered to a diet prescribed to her by registered dietitians based on the American Diabetes Association guidelines. Again, at the time, the ADA's guidelines were all about low fat and high grain, blah, blah, blah. They have now, as of last year, shifted to, low carb can be a part of that. So this case study is underscoring what it could look like for those patients and those clinicians that use a low-carb ketogenic diet with some periods of intermittent fasting with their diabetes patients. So this is a really important study that I'm reading from. So her previous diet, the diabetes diet she was eating, consisted of carbs from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, low-fat dairy, as well as poultry, fish, and nuts. She had strictly limited her intake of saturated fat, red meat, sweets, sugar-sweetened beverages, and sodium, and she had regularly eaten 3 meals per day with 2 snacks. Did you catch this? She had cut sugar, she had cut sweets, and yet she still had out of control blood sugar, A1C, the whole gamut. Like a lot of people say, well, the reason why, okay, that's fine, great, but she cut those things out and she didn't get good results. Why? Fruit still has sugar in it. Vegetables, depending on which one she got it, they're the starchy vegetables, they can turn to sugar in the body. Whole grains, sugar bomb for the body. Legumes, sugar. Low-fat dairy, when you cut the fat out of the dairy and you eat fat-free or drink fat-free milk and eat fat-free cheese, what happens to the concentration of the sugars that are natural in dairy? That's right, they get more concentrated and thus higher levels of sugar. Now, yes, she got protein from poultry, fish, and nuts, but at the end of the day, minimal fat, constantly hungry, lots of carbs, blood sugar, blood sugar, blood sugar, blood sugar. No wonder her A1C got out of control. In June of 2016, she was 54 years old at the time. Her A1C was 8.7, BMI 23.2, taking metformin and on the diabetic diet, which we just described. Glipizide was also added. That's another diabetic drug. By February of 2017, her A1C had only gotten marginally better, down to 8.3, but she experienced weight gain with a rise in her BMI to 24%, a common side effect of taking the glipizide, by the way. So then she was put on pioglitazone, which is another diabetes drug. Subsequently was added to the metformin and the glipizide. She reported not taking it because she would have hypoglycemia and dizziness. In June of 2017, her A1C was down to 7.8. She was told to lower her dose of the glipizide, keep taking the metformin, and to resume back on the pioglitazone. In October of 2017, her A1C was at 6.5, so it was seeing improvement. Remember, she was on all these medications for this improvement. She reported having frequent hypoglycemia at that time, dizziness, feeling unwell very often. She discontinued the pioglitazone and the glipizide on her own. And in July 2018, her A1C was back up to 9.3 on a regimen of metformin and the diabetes diet. So I hope you caught that. Here she is following everything her diabetes doctor told her to do to control her disease. Eat all these carbs, eat all these grains, cut saturated fat, blah, blah, blah. Don't eat red meat, don't eat sweets, blah, blah, blah. And then they had to adjust her medications to do something ostensibly that they didn't need to do. She was only taking the meds to take care of the carbs she was eating. And how they can't put two and two together, that the reason you have to put these patients on these increasing loads of drugs is just to cover the effects of the carbs. But here's the thing, she was getting improved markers in her A1C. So the doc said, oh, look, the drugs are working. Meanwhile, gobble, 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 all these carbs, taking all these drugs to then cover up the effects of the carbs. And oh yeah, okay, A1C's getting better, you're getting healed. And probably by the time she got down to that 6.5, when she was miserable with hypoglycemia and dizziness and feeling unwell, she got to the point where she was like, okay, if this is how I have to feel to be under control, at 6.5, her doctor's probably celebrating, oh my gosh, you're so healthy now. And she was anything but healthy. And this is why we can't hang our hats too much just on markers. I think if someone has improved metabolic markers like an A1C level, you need to ask how you feel. Because if you've got a 6.5 A1C and you used to be 8.7, okay, it's improved, but do you feel good? And nobody ever asks that. Whereas if you talk to someone who eats a ketogenic diet and their A1C comes into well within range and they drop it amazingly, how do you feel? Oh, I'm so energetic, I'm mentally clear, and da-da-da. That's the key. There is no equivalency when it comes to drug therapy covering up the effects of carbohydrate and a ketogenic diet naturally lowering your A1C. And oh yeah, by the way, you feel good in the process. So what did Dr. Fung and his team do for the treatment? In July of 2018, she began strictly following the ketogenic diet, followed by intermittent fasting 2 weeks later. The ketogenic low-carb, high-fat diet consisted of a macronutrient ratio of 80% fat, 15% protein, and 5% carbohydrate. The diet focused in on eating real, whole, natural, unprocessed fats, containing a wide variety of monounsaturated as well as polyunsaturated fats. Protein was predominantly from pasture-raised chickens and chicken eggs, grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish. Grains, starches, legumes, and the majority of all fruits were eliminated from her diet. Remember, that was the preponderance of her diet before. Dr. Fung says, those are the things messing with your diabetes. Get them out. And then most of the carbs that were in the diet consisted of green leafy vegetables, raw and fermented vegetables. Total daily consumption was estimated to be about 20 to 30 grams of total carbohydrates and around 1,500 calories. She reported eating to satiety, but didn't really measure her calories. Intermittent fasting was started at 24 hours 3 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. After 2 weeks, she increased the duration to 42 hours 3 times a week, which she did for 4 more months. Because of the significant improvement she was seeing in her blood glucose and the lack of available data to guide the choice of a follow-up regimen, she then reduced her fasting to 42 hours on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then 16 hours on Fridays for 4 months. In an effort to test the need for continued 42-hour fasts, she started a maintenance phase, during which fasting was reduced to 16 hours a day and 24 hours a day 3 times a month for 6 months. Metformin 1,000 milligrams twice a day was reinstated at the start of the maintenance. When not fasting, she ate 2 meals per day with no additional snacks between the meals. On the days that she did fast for 24 hours, she ate 1 meal per day. So in other words, when you do OMAD and you eat, like you wake up in the morning, you eat at noon, then you go the whole rest of the day, and then the first part of the next day until noon the next day, that's the 1 meal a day OMAD. During the fast, she would drink water, plain tea or coffee, and occasionally she would have some homemade bone broth. Okay, so what happened? 4 weeks after initiating her dietary changes, the patient discontinued all medications, including metformin. She had a hypertension medication she came off of, as well as a statin medication for lowering her cholesterol. At the same time, significantly improved her blood sugar levels. A timeline and summary of the patient's diabetic medications with health parameters recorded at each visit is on display in this table. So look at this table. This is all of the medication she was taking in the regimen. I know you can't really see it there, but I'm just showing you it's a long list of all these things. And the timeline shows you how her A1C just progressively got lower and lower and lower, and how her weight pretty much stayed stagnant. It didn't really change that much. Same with the BMI. And she got completely off of all those medications until she went back in the maintenance phase. I would love to ask Dr. Fung why he put her back on the metformin. If the keto and fasting seem to be working well, why would you put her back on a medication? I do know metformin, if you're going to put a patient with a history of diabetes on any medication, metformin seems to be a pretty good one. It's got a blood sugar controlling effect. It also has a slight little inflammation lowering effect as well, and somewhat can modulate any cholesterol problems too. So there are benefits that come from taking metformin. The only thing some people report is it can be upsetting to their stomach. And so that's why a lot of people poo-poo on it. But for the most part, it's a pretty good drug. A few hypoglycemic episodes were noted only when initiating IF. So when she first started doing intermittent fasting, she'd be in the midst of the fast and she'd feel dizzy and other signs of hypoglycemia. But none came after that initial first couple of fasts. Her A1C at 8 months was 6.4, at which time fasting insulin and postprandial insulin rise and C-peptide were all on the lower end of normal. So it didn't take long for her to see really fast improvements in their health, which in the midst of this COVID-19, and they're always talking about metabolic health markers kind of being the trigger that is making this a lot worse in some people. You know, we try to tell people you're going to change the metabolism. You're going to change everything in your body very rapidly, even before it shows up in any weight loss. If you need to lose weight, you're going to see blood sugar control, insulin lower, inflammation lower. All of these things get better very, very quickly. Within as like 4 to 6 weeks, you can see dramatic changes that could be profound in protecting you. At this point, when glycemic control had been achieved, metformin was added back in. At 14 months, A1C had gone down to 5.8. So that's what they did, was a 14-month case study. I'm assuming that she's continued on this ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting regimen, and it's going to come even lower. 5.8 is a lot better than she was. Ideally, you want A1C below 5.5, and ideally, optimally, under 5.0 for A1C. But considering where she came from, this is pretty awesome. The patient's weight and BMI were mildly reduced as demonstrated in figure 2. So I'm looking at figure 2 here. It's all in kilos. So when she started the ketogenic diet, it looks, oh, that's her A1C, not her BMI. Where's her BMI? Oh, there's her BMI. Look at this graph, you guys, of her BMI. It didn't move. It was basically unchanged throughout the entire 14 months. It wiggled a little bit, but look at that. It went slightly down and then slowly came back up because it wasn't about weight loss. It was about improving metabolic health, vis-a-vis lowering blood sugar, normalizing insulin levels, lowering inflammation levels. All of those things were positive results that came from this. Her most recent weight and BMI, 53 kilos and 21.6 for the BMI. When fasting, she recorded ketone levels between 0.5 and 1.0, so she was in nutritional ketosis. She tested with a blood meter. During the first 8 days after initiating keto, the patient reported mild fatigue and a headache. That's usually electrolyte imbalance when you have fatigue and headache within the first couple of weeks of starting keto. So that's why you hear me talk about, taking salt, drinking enough fluids, and all of those things where the body is shifting from being a sugar burner to a fat burner. These self-limited symptoms are common and commonly referred to colloquially as the keto flu. Thereafter, she reported no difficulties in maintaining the diet or the fasting regimen. She noted an improvement in her energy levels, exercise tolerance, and quality of life. And those are big ones, guys. When you have a diet therapy meant to control your diabetes, do you think you're going to have an increase in your energy? Most people know. Most people, they kind of freak out and go, oh my God, it's going to be horrible. I'm going to be hungry. Nope. Energy levels through the roof. Exercise tolerance, meaning she wanted to wiggle. She liked it. She enjoyed it. And then quality of life, just kind of in the day-to-day, so maybe some of the aches and pains started to go away. Despite tolerating the 42-hour fasting periods without difficulty, she reported greater satisfaction with her fasting regimen in the maintenance phase. So that's where she did 16-8. So 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of a feeding window, citing a greater sense of normalcy when able to engage in daily meals. And here's the thing. When you eat keto, you typically only eat about 1 to 2 meals a day anyway. So it's very easy to get those 1 to 2 meals in a very tight feeding window. If you eat 1 meal, you're going to do an OMAD, so a 24-hour fast. If you eat 2 meals, just get the 2 meals in within like a 6 to 8 hour period, and you get this wonderful period of intermittent fasting. And she felt normal to her. And those of us that eat keto and have done this for a little while, it is incredibly normal. That's pretty much my daily life. I have a meal, go a period of time, have another meal, and then go a long period of time of fasting until the meal the next day. Pretty easy, right? The patient currently is continuing with her ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, which she plans to do indefinitely. We present a case of a normal weight patient with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, despite adherence to all the medications and standard diet advice, who successfully managed her condition using a relatively novel lifestyle approach with intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet. The therapeutic benefits of these two therapies in the management of type 2 diabetes are reported all across the medical literature, but they have not been studied on a larger scale. Their use is guided predominantly by an understanding of their proposed pathophysiologic mechanisms reported in animal-based models and by outcomes reported in limited human data. Studies on IF generally demonstrate its effectiveness in improving glycemic control and other metabolic parameters, things like reduction of visceral fat, blood pressure, markers of oxidative stress, and inflammation. The available human data for IF show marked benefit in prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. I would not be surprised, guys, now that keto low-carb diets are accepted as part of the ADA recommendations of nutritional approaches for controlling diabetes, I would not be surprised if they don't, in the coming years, add intermittent fasting as another one of those adjunct protocols. So pick whichever diabetes diet you want to do, and then add in periods of intermittent fasting. Now, what's going to happen is those people who do the standard low-fat, high-grain type of diabetes diet, they're going to be miserable fasting. But those who eat a ketogenic diet, a low-carb diet, to control their diabetes, and then they add in deliberately periods of intermittent fasting, they're going to be completely fine with it. And in fact, I would argue most people that start on a low-carb ketogenic diet, they don't have to be told to intermittent fast. You just do it. It just spontaneously starts to happen, and it's a beautiful thing. In a case report of 3 patients with long-standing type 2 diabetes, each requiring at least 70 units of insulin per day, the implementation of 24-hour fasts either 3 times per week or on alternate days, combined with a low-carb diet, resulted in the complete discontinuation of insulin in all of the patients. Reductions in their A1C, BMI, and waist circumference were also demonstrated. Moreover, the benefits of intermittent fasting on insulin sensitivity extend well beyond their influence on the weight loss. A recent trial in men with prediabetes and overweight or obesity showed that 5 weeks of an intermittent fasting regimen can improve insulin sensitivity and the pancreatic beta cell responsiveness independent of weight loss. So those of you that don't know about beta cells, so when your beta cell function is inhibited, that's when you start to have insulin resistance. And if it remains inhibited and it remains, in other words, when you eat carbohydrates, you have a glycemic response, glucose is in the bloodstream, insulin is squirted out from the pancreas, okay? And so if the pancreas has impaired beta cell function, it can't squirt out appropriate enough insulin to take care of that blood sugar. And this is where over time it starts squirting out more, but it's not taking care of the blood sugar. And so the function becomes really disrupted to the point that before long your pancreas is like, all right, I'm out. And so it makes it extremely hard, and that's when people develop type 2 diabetes. And then the most extreme form of beta cell function petering out is the type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition where the body sees the pancreas as a foreign invader, and the body starts attacking itself. And when the body attacks the pancreas and the pancreas beta cell function no longer exists, you are suddenly insulin dependent and your beta cell function is completely gone in your pancreas. Therefore, that's why a type 1 diabetic has to squirt themselves with insulin in order to deal with the foods that they eat. Another study compared calorie restriction to IF for weight loss, showed a greater increase in insulin sensitivity with the intermittent fasting. The findings in our case mirror those in the literature. IF was an effective and sustainable tool for achieving glycemic control and reducing the need for pharmacotherapy in our patient independent of weight loss. So again, they're laying the groundwork here. You don't got to lose weight. You don't need to lose weight in order to get the benefits to your type 2 diabetes markers. Animal data propose a mechanistic understanding of the effects of intermittent fasting on glycemic control, providing hope that this treatment modality may slow or reverse the progression of type 2 diabetes. Mice fed a fasting mimicking diet showed an increase in the proliferation and number of insulin-generating pancreatic beta cells in late-stage type 2 diabetes. Differentiated cells in the pancreas first decreased in the number in the fasted state, and then transition cells and beta cells proliferated in the refed state as well. This study suggests that the therapeutic benefit of intermittent fasting lies in that combination of physiologic effects caused by both the fasted state and by the recovery period during the feeding phase as a means to promote beta cell repair. So in other words, the benefits you're getting from these periods of fasting is you're giving your pancreas a break. You're allowing your pancreas to kind of say, finally, I don't have to work. I got a paid vacation today. Dummy up there is not feeding me any food, so I can chill. I'm just chilling like a villain. Meanwhile, they're healing. Like when you go on vacation, you start to heal. And you come back and you're refreshed and you're renewed. So that when you start eating again, the pancreas goes, oh, I got you, man. You gave me a vacation. I'm going to work hard for you today. And thus that insulin sensitivity gets better. You see why the fasting works so well? You see why it produces healing? A lot better than carbohydrate, or a lot better than calorie restriction, because with calorie restriction, your pancreas is still working. But when you fast, your pancreas gets the break for that period of time of fasting. And then when it comes back to a fed state, it's all good. Another study in mice showed increased pancreatic beta cell mass using IF. Glucose stimulated insulin secretion increased, and the beta cell apoptosis decreased. Weight loss was not required, again, for these benefits of IF. So the possibility that intermittent fasting can promote pancreatic beta cells to regenerate has the potential to revolutionize the treatment of type 2 diabetes, currently viewed as a chronic progressive disease. If you know anything about Dr. Fung's work, he thinks this notion that type 2 diabetes is a chronic progressive disease, meaning it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse the older you get. He just abhors that thinking. Well, it's just, okay, you've got type 2 diabetes, good luck. That's a horrible way to leave people with this disease that is completely treatable with diet and lifestyle changes, which is why they're doing this case study. Further human studies are needed to help illuminate the potential role of IF in slowing or reversing this disease. So the processes linking intermittent fasting and the benefits in insulin sensitivity are currently being studied, looking at ways to mimic the effects of IF. One such area of ongoing research is the sirtuin proteins. It's a family of enzymes with regulatory effects on glucose homeostasis, fat metabolism, and lifespan that's regulated by both nutrient levels and calorie restriction. In particular, the SIRT6, sirtuin 6, is currently being studied as a potential therapeutic target for treating insulin resistance. So if you have IR, listen up. SIRT6 in animal studies enhances insulin sensitivity and thereby decreases your fasting blood glucose. Both short-term fasting and long-term calorie restriction will increase this SIRT6 levels in animal data, further highlighting the role that IF can play in modifying disease. Carbohydrate restriction is already considered an effective treatment for type 2 diabetes as part of the standard of care by the ADA and the European Association for the Study of Diabetes. Since this got published, you can add Diabetes Canada to that list as well, who also recognizes low-carb diets for type 2 diabetes. This approach even predates the development of exogenous insulin. We knew about this in 1921, talking about the ketogenic diet, and it's based on the fact that carbohydrates are the macronutrient with the highest glycemic and insulin indices. And increased carb intake worsens your insulin resistance, such as postprandial glucose levels and insulin levels. Several trials have demonstrated improvements in A1C and insulin sensitivity when you go low carb. The benefits of dietary carbohydrate restriction on the control of blood glucose do not require any weight loss for this to happen. And low carb diets have been shown to be generally well tolerated, not just tolerated, enjoyed. We have bacon. Come on over to the dark side. While the benefits of low carb diets in type 2 diabetes are well accepted, the role of KD in the management of type 2 diabetes is not widely accepted, due partly to the concerns about long-term safety, which we've talked about that before. There is no long-term safety concerns. They always talk about the cardiovascular risks, but we know all of the things associated with cardiovascular that they look at, things like total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. They're highly archaic in looking at this issue. What we're looking for is actual signs of disease. Now, I recently did a Jimmy Rants talking about getting a CT heart scan to see if there's actual disease happening, which, by the way, somebody wrote me the other day and they said, look, I went to my doctor with your video on Jimmy Rants talking about getting a CT heart scan to get the CAC, the heart calcium score. And that he's like, oh, that's a good idea. Here you go. And she got it. All they had to do was ask. And so ask and you shall receive. Achieving nutritional ketosis has been shown to result in diabetes remission and reversal. A non-randomized long-term study using ketogenic diet found significant improvements in all the biomarkers like A1C, weight, fasting glucose, fasting insulin, blood pressure, cholesterol, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so that's the inflammation marker, and a reduction in the need for type 2 diabetes medications. By contrast, the control arm in that study consisted of patients with type 2 diabetes getting the usual care. Remember the case study, the 57-year-old in this case study? She was on the usual care, and she was on a myriad of drugs, and she did not do well. They also got counseling on lifestyle interventions by a registered dietitian, and there was no significant improvement in any of the biomarkers. Like, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result, it's insanity. And we have to stop being insane when it comes to type 2 diabetes. So I'm running out of time, but I want to make sure I get to the end here. You're getting the gist of this. It's effective in controlling the diabetes even without having weight loss. The time to achieve glycemic control in type 2 diabetes with the combined approaches varies, and further studies are needed to determine and define what those factors are, such as the degree of insulin resistance, the pancreatic beta cell reserve. Our patient achieved glycemic control within 4 months of combining KD and IF. Another study found in 3 patients with insulin-dependent diabetes, implementation of IF and a low-carb diet got discontinuation of insulin between 5 and 18 days. That's how quick it happens, you guys. For maintenance of glycemic control, the duration and degree of IF and carbohydrate restriction must also be tailored to the individual patient, which is why you need to, if you're taking medications as an out-of-control type 2 diabetic, you must, please hear me clearly, must seek medical attention from somebody that can adjust your medications. I remember talking to Dr. Eric Westman one time about one of his patients and his record for taking someone off of injectable insulin. Hold on to your hats. This person was on 200 units of insulin a day. So their level of insulin resistance was bad, like about the worst it could possibly be. And within 1 day of carbohydrate restriction, no insulin. 200 units to 0 in 1 day. Now, that doesn't tell you what that insulin was actually doing. It was covering the effects of the diet they were eating. Came off of it. For maintenance of glycemic control, the duration and degree of IF and carbohydrate restriction must also be tailored to the individual patient. As demonstrated in this case study, once glycemic control is achieved, the length of fast were able to be reduced without compromising that control of the blood glucose. Further studies should also help to identify patient characteristics that will predict the ideal fasting lengths and carbohydrate limits in the management of type 2 diabetes. I would say do the length of fasts that are comfortable for you. Eat the form of keto that is comfortable and effective for you. Some keto and some fasting is better than no keto and no fasting. This is the problem. People say, well, I can't do X version of keto or X version of fasting. Okay, well, you can't do those versions. Do the one you will do. And if you do the one you will do, then what you'll find is you do it and then you go, dang, I could go longer than 18 hours of fasting. Then you push it to 24. So progress your way up. The available data on ketogenic diets and intermittent fasting is encouraging, and this case study report and review of the literature highlights the need for more extensive research on these 2 treatment modalities in the treatment of type 2 diabetes. With the alarming rise in incidence of type 2 diabetes worldwide, we desperately need a cost-effective and widely available strategy to help manage this growing disease. Pharmaceutical drugs and invasive bariatric surgery can be effectively lowered through the use of this approach. Further, as shown in animal and human data, the strategies discussed in this study have the potential to modify the course of type 2 diabetes, which has long been misunderstood. If validated in a large-scale randomized controlled trial, the current data on IF and keto have the potential to revolutionize our understanding of this pathophysiology of type 2 diabetes and profoundly impact the standard approach to the treatment of this disease. So once again, if you joined us late, this was a case study that got published in a major journal, the British Medical Journal Case Reports, June 12th, 2020. by Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, Charlene Lichtash, and Catherine Connor Ostowich. And so it's called Therapeutic Use of Intermittent Fasting and Keto Diet, Alternative Treatment for Type 2 Diabetes, Normal Weight Woman, 14-month case study. So go look that up if you want to over on the bmj.com website. But good news, guys. Like, I love seeing and reading and sharing this kind of information because you're not going to hear about this in the mainstream. Because there's too many pharmaceutical companies that make a crap load of money off of these drugs that are supposed to be helping the type 2 diabetics. Most of those drugs, except for metformin's kind of outside the realm of that, but most of the drugs and most of the insulin that type 2 diabetics are taking, their sole purpose is to cover up the effects of the carbohydrate. Okay? You just have to know that. I am desperately running out of time very quickly. I don't want to totally ignore you guys, but this was too important for me not to go fully into it. So thank you for being here today. JimmyRants.com. I'm going to come here first. Shirley says, I was around 135 to 140 when I started keto 1.5 years ago. I'm exactly the same weight, but my health, mood, energy levels, and focus are improved. Aching joints have stopped too. Shirley, that is awesome, girl. Way to go. J.S. Martin, my A1C is steady at 5.5 with keto and IF after I read the obesity code. That's Dr. Jason Fung's book. I no longer need the Victoza and still take metformin. Keep at it, because the longer you do this, the more the healing happens. And don't feel like you have to rush the healing. It took you a long time to get to that point. Now, take your time. I would add in things like maybe infrared sauna, maybe some red light therapy, get out in the sun, add in little bits of movement. There's little things you can do that can bring that under control even more. So just keep at it. You're doing a great job. Thank you, Instagram. Let me pop over here to my Facebook page. And again, I am rapidly running out of time. Sorry about that, guys. Cindy says, I was diabetic for 10 years, followed the standard ADA diet strictly, only got sicker, but with the keto way of eating, I got off of 13 prescription medications and 80 units of insulin a day. Thanks for sticking up for us. Oh, wow. That is awesome. You go. Wow. Wow, that's so cool. Is intermittent fasting safe for people who've had a gastric sleeve? So that's a great question. Intermittent fasting, I think so. Gastric sleeve, gastric bypass, any of those weight loss surgeries can be a little bit problematic with some extended fasting, but I think if you want to do a 16-hour fast and you eat within that 8-hour window, you could try it to see. I mean, the worst case scenario is you go, okay, no, because you're limited in the amount of food you can eat at one time. But the thing about an 8-hour window is you could eat at noon, then you could eat at like 2:30, then you could eat again at say 4:35, and then eat again at like 7:30 or 8. If you need little small meals within that 8 hours, you could do it. So I would love to know how that works for you. Oh wow, Cindy said she started A1C of 11.7 and today 4.8. Wow. I bow down to you because that is awesome. That is so freaking awesome. If not doing this for diabetes, do it for COVID protection, says Paula. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I wonder if she lost weight after her body repaired. Any news on this? No, she was normal weight to begin with, so she didn't have weight to lose. I want to shout that from the mountaintop. Type 2 diabetes is curable. It is. It's something I talk about quite a bit. Fasting and keto help get rid of my diabetes, says Tracy. Awesome. All right, let me come back over here. I know I'm running out of time. Oh yeah, it says I have like a minute left. So let's see if there's any final comments. And I don't see any. So good news, guys. Case study. IF and keto help with type 2 diabetes. If you have type 2 diabetes and you're not quite getting your doctor on board, give him that case study because that might open his eyes. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me right here on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. We go Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Yes, I'm talking fast because I'm running out of time. Also simulcast on Facebook. Watch it on replay on IGTV. Watch it on replay over at YouTube. Type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Finally, go to jimmyrants.com. You see all the past episodes. Click on the Patreon if you love what I do here. And if you want me to slow down the next time, then I don't know how I'm going to do it because I'm running out of time. I don't know how to do this. I don't know. How's that for ending a show? I just scared my cat. She just ran a mile when I screamed.